Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here on Tactical Review Live. Really appreciate you guys coming alongside us here tonight, and I do want to start out by saying thank you to channel sponsor Freedom Reloads and Arms down in Linden, Indiana. Appreciate the support that they're giving the channel. So if you guys get up through North Central Indiana, definitely make sure to swing down, check them out. You can check them out over on Facebook. That's Freedom Reloads and Arms. As you guys know, I'm Blair from Tactical Review, and joining me on the left side of the screen is Elias from the Liberty Review podcast. Elias, good evening.
Good evening. Apparently, I'm coming in late.
That's okay.
It was still 9:00 and 9:01 yet.
So, guys, as you can see from the title, what we're wanting to talk about on this last live stream before election 2020 is constitutional liberty and the future of America. Of course, we could take a very pessimistic view right off the bat, and then in the stream, we could take an optimistic view. We could just, say it's all sunshine and roses and listen to every bit of the campaign rhetoric and close it down. But that's not what we do here.
Or we can just say we're all screwed and go home.
Fair enough. It's swirling.
That's the pessimistic view. Well, it's gone. We'll see you all later.
It's swirling the drain. It's fine. It'll be fine. No, appreciate you guys joining us. And what we actually want to do here this evening, and again, there's a lot of ways we could have gone about this, but really we're wanting to just go through the Bill of Rights and kind of take a look at statements or stances or legislation sometimes that the candidates have enacted, and just kind of take a look at what their history and statements say about what they believe about the Bill of Rights. Obviously, the Bill of Rights is not a complete codification of every right and privilege that we have as Americans. And legitimately, I think that the Bill of Rights is a complete misnomer. It should be called the Bill of Restrictions because it's all about what the government is not supposed to be able to touch. More on that as we go. So anyway, I see Poor Conservative. He joined us a little bit before the hour. And then we've got Brownies for My Fat, Pete Duvall. Hopefully we get some more folks in here to talk with us. Like I said, just really feel like it's a really important subject as we go into what should be one of the most important days on the calendar. And for all of my viewers who are over 18, in case you haven't seen it on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, every random ad-based game or ad-supported game you play, YouTube, and everything else, probably including your smart TV, your smart refrigerator, and your toilet, you should go vote on Tuesday if you haven't really voted already. Right.
What?
I know, right?
Is there an election?
Something like that.
I told you today that I got a mailer for the governor today. That we got 3 of them. The exact same thing. One addressed to me, one addressed to my wife, and then one addressed to the household.
It's it's a fantastic use of somebody's money, donors' money.
It's not my money.
It wasn't my money. I haven't contributed to anybody's.
I don't contribute to any of them. I don't see the point.
One of the Instagram meme pages that I follow said that he was going to contribute to the Trump campaign just to get his name on the list so that he could get a visit from Antifa. But I don't know if he actually did or not. Alrighty, so let's get going here. First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. I don't even feel like we need to update that into modern vernacular. So, I'd like to say that we've got a clear winner here, but I seem to recall back in March or April, the Secret Service flinging some tear gas at a group of people who were gathered to protest so that there could be a photo op.
So I'll say you don't have a clear winner. I mean, yeah, you have to. The country's going to lose on this one. You know, Trump, and ever since he started campaigning, certainly as president, if he had a way to silence the media, he would do it. You don't have to like the media. You don't have to like what they're saying. I think we can all agree that they are pretty incompetent. A lot of rhetoric, very much instigators. But the fact of the matter is, the First Amendment allows them to have freedom of speech, and and freedom of the press to print what they need to print, and whether it's right or wrong, it's up to us to decide whether or not what they're saying is accurate. What's interesting to me is we're not even ranked one of the top countries for freedom of press or freedom of speech. Now, I mean, and it's really weird when you think about it. That's our First Amendment, and yet we're ranked pretty low on that. But if Trump had his way, the media would be silenced. Anybody that was protesting against him would be silenced, among a lot of other things. So definitely Trump is not a carrying the banner of the First Amendment. And that's all there is to it.
I absolutely agree with you on that. Now, that being said, what about, and as I ask this question, please know that I'm not saying that I think we need more government to solve the problem. But I absolutely see a problem in the fact that the media as a whole is giving free campaign to the Biden-Harris campaign. So I mean, what's the solution to that? Because I don't believe that more government is the solution by any stretch of the imagination.
So a lot of that has to do with federal election campaign laws. And I don't really know the full aspect of it. I'll admit that. But I'll say right now, even if we go back to the 1700s, you had the press was doing that. The press had their own, if you think about a lot of these newspapers that we have today, if you look, you'll have a lot of them that are named the Democrat,
Right.
the Republican. That's because that's what those papers were actually geared more towards. So the fact that the media does it is not a problem necessarily. The problem it comes into when they act as if they're going to be unbiased, as if they're saying that, we are completely unbiased, but you should go vote for Biden.
Right.
Unbiased is, here is the facts as we know them, and that's it. And then that's where you used to have also kind of like op-eds and things like that, and to bring in opinions and things like that of people. But it's not necessarily bad that they're skewing one way. What's bad, in my opinion, is more of they're going to act as if they are, but they're really not. And that comes down more to, and the problem is we don't really want the government involved telling them what they can and can't say. We don't want state-run media. It's up to people to actually do a better job of kind of deciding what they're going to watch, which of course is really difficult when we're in a country where the media is controlled by like 3 or 4 companies, and that's it.
Well, that's where we got you and I come in, because not to toot our own horns, but I feel like we do a pretty decent job of trying to lay out all the facts that we've found, and unless we're talking about the ATF, and then there's only one side.
Yeah, exactly. I try to. That's one of my big things is I think there's issues on both sides. I think both sides are pretty bad.
Absolutely.
And there are some things where I can agree with, but recognize that they're unconstitutional, which we discussed before. And there are things I don't agree with, but I can say, well, it's constitutional what they're doing. And that's where our representatives, but again, it comes back to this, the whole system is just broken.
Yeah.
Because the representatives that are in don't represent us. They represent those 3 or 4 media companies.
Or they
because a support decision at some point decided that corporations are people, so therefore can donate ridiculous amount of monies to campaigns, and at that point it took it out of our hands.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, poor conservative. We're doing okay as Hoosiers, or for Hoosiers. We're just a bunch of Hoosier hicks, man.
Hey, don't make me bring up my Texas hat.
Well, that's true. Elias isn't.
I'm only part Hoosier. I'm the transplant.
He's an adopted Hoosier. All right. Of course, we've addressed what Mr. Trump has to say. What about Mr. Biden? Where does he stand on freedom of the press, freedom of religion? I mean, well, for one thing, he's already talking national executive order, hardcore lockdowns. So that obviously.
Right. So his isn't going to be so much freedom of the press. After all, freedom of the press is really working out very well for him. I think what we're going to see with Biden is going to be more freedom of religion.
Freedom to assemble.
We've already got some issues where a good example is the bakery case, where it was against somebody's religious views to create something, and he wanted it done.
Right.
To kind of give an example of the reason why, for those who didn't really follow the masterpiece, the bakery case, as we know, it was one of those, somebody was marrying a person of the same sex, and they wanted this cake designed, and he said no. The guy said, I refuse to create one for this. Note now that he didn't refuse to sell them a cake that was already made. He refused to create one just for them. The courts in Colorado ruled against him, and ultimately the Supreme Court reversed the ruling, and the reason was it actually came down to the First Amendment. The First Amendment has been held by precedent that it's freedom of speech, but also freedom from being compelled to speech.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Supreme Court's view, forcing somebody to create something that does not exist is compelling them to create something.
Right.
And then mix that with something that goes against their religion, and that's the whole thing. So I don't know. I think Biden falls into the same group of people that also want to compel developers to write backdoors for encryption and things like that. So, and that's one of those things when you're looking at these different amendments, it's not just exactly what the words say. There is that aspect to it, but it's understanding the meaning behind it.
Right. Which is where we struggle as we move on to the next amendment.
Right. It's easy to say, hey, they're not going to try to restrict you from going to church. Well, actually they will in California right now. But what they can do is say, you're not allowed to do this, or you have to do this because of your religion. You can't use religion as an example. There's a case right now about to go to the Supreme Court in Philadelphia. I think it's Philadelphia, where they're trying to, there's a Catholic, the city there, or the state there, outsources fostering to a couple different groups, and one of them is a Catholic group who has said we will not take same-sex applicants to foster children. The state's saying you have to, and it's up at the Supreme Court now, which I can kind of see both sides of it, so I kind of get it. But the fact of the matter is that's where it is, and these are the kind of religion cases as we go forward we're going to see. And so I could see Biden kind of presenting a problem in terms of freedom of religion and freedom of assembly.
Right.
So.
Alrighty.
That's my thoughts on it.
And guys, anytime you guys who are watching and have something to say, drop it in the live chat. If it starts getting really busy, make sure to do it.
Especially if you disagree with
or
Blair. Tell us.
Absolutely. The whole point here is to have reasonable, logical discourse.
I was just going to tell them they're being unfair to me and then talk over them.
Oh, okay. Will you shut up, man?
Come on, man.
But yeah, no, because you know what? None of us learn without dissenting opinions. None of us, even if you end up saying, no, I believe my position is right, you've thought through why you hold that belief. It's not simply a matter of, well, it's true because I think it should be true. So All right, on to the one that is probably nearest and dearest to my heart. Absolutely, the teeth.
I would say to everybody in here, if they're following your channel.
I'd say there's a good chance. There's a good chance. And if you've stumbled onto the live stream channel, make sure you use the link in the description and sub to the main channel where you're going to see the most of the content, I'd say. But anyway, Second Amendment. Most of us can quote this by heart. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And this is one that, with the kind of evolution of the language, I feel like we need to make sure that we are understanding in modern vernacular. First off, is well regulated because the anti-gunners, so basically I can say the left, will tell you that that means that from the beginning the intention was for the government to have say-so in the Second Amendment. And then they're going to go on and they're going to hit on that word militia. You'll be told everything from that means the military to that means the National Guard, etc., etc. Now, the problem with the, and I will agree that the official state militia has been declared to be the National Guard, however, militia in this original vernacular simply meant able-bodied men who are willing and able to take up arms in defense of the country. So that is we the people. Being necessary to the security of the free state, once again, that goes back to states' rights and how we're supposed to be a kind of loose-ish coalition of independent states. Right of the people, that's us. To keep and bear arms, that's everything. That's knives, that's firearms, that's whatever. There's no restrictions there. Shall not be infringed. I mean, yeah.
You know, I think actually the restrictions could be there. And I think it's interesting if you go back and look at what the Supreme Court considered as restrictions back in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this a little bit last week, I think, about the case of the guy who was arrested for having a sawed-off shotgun, and the Supreme Court upheld his conviction, and their reasoning was sawed-off shotguns aren't used in militaries.
Right.
So I can devise from that what we are authorized to have is whatever the military has.
Right, which means that that's an ever-changing landscape. And so then the next question is...
Well, not just that, but, you know, it talks about, you know, those things that are definitely covered under NFA. That's what the military is using. So yeah.
Well, so my question then, does that mean that, so the type of firearms that are no longer firearms anyway, of course those aren't regulated, things like black powder and stuff like that.
Right.
But with that in mind, what about like M1 Garands? Those were in military service,
Mm-hmm.
but they are no longer in military service. So does that mean that they are not covered by the auspices?
I wonder if they would be covered due to the fact that they had at one time.
Yeah.
Now, again, I'm not saying that they're right. I think any firearm is covered under this. I'm just
Well, and
kind of bringing up that interesting case.
Actually, I think we will segue a little bit here to the whole any other weapon thing that the ATF is working on right now. After we go through the candidates' stances on this.
Well, and let's not forget that militia, you know, poor conservatives talking about the definition of militia. Remember that there is a legal definition for a militia in the United States. And the legal definition of the militia is that you have is any male between the age of 17 and 40 or is it 45? I can't remember.
I think it's 45.
It's one or the other. I think it's 45. Any male between the ages of 17 and 45 is a member of the militia. If they're a member of the National Guard, they are a member of the organized militia. If they are not a member of the National Guard, they are considered a unorganized militia.
Gotcha.
And well, actually, the public law back in the 50s was also amended to say males between the age of 17 and 45 and any female in the National Guard.
Gotcha.
So let's you know, we got to keep that in mind too, that there is a legal definition for the word militia, and that is pretty much all of us. able-bodied. Forgot about that part. There is able-bodied in there. But that's pretty much all of us are a member of the unorganized militia.
Right. And when did you said that definition was expanded in the
original
50s?
definition, yeah, and in the 50s it was expanded to include women who were members of the National Guard.
Gotcha. So when was the original definition? Was that back around 1791, or was that
hundreds, I think?
Okay.
Yeah, maybe look it up real quick. Public law militia.
Holy crap, Zeke Shoots is in here. Welcome, and Ninja Scout just joined us.
U.S. Code 246. Or maybe I was wrong. Maybe 1956 was when it was created. In 2016, maybe is when it was amended.
That I could see that.
Yeah, because the first thing I see for it is 1956. So I may be wrong. In 1950s, it was defined, and then in 2016, it was amended to put women in there from the National Guard.
So now I myself would give preference to the original mindset of the militia, because in the 1700s, it's you've got a rifle, you better get out there and make some good redcoats.
Well, and that's one of the things you got to look back when you go back and you look and read what the framers were writing at the time. That's pretty much what they expected. They expected that everybody who could do it would be a part of this militia, and so therefore you need to train with the weapons you would need to be trained for.
Absolutely.
And we've talked about before, in the idea that that the framers meant only organized militia members or only certain kind of things. It kind of flies in the face when you read the Federalist Papers, because Madison talks about the fact that the United States is the most well-armed, and it's the only country in the world at the time that readily armed its citizens.
Right.
So it kind of just all goes out the window. Anyway, I took you off.
No. That's fine, because I think it's very important to make sure that we understand, because our language has changed in the last 250 years, and so it's important to make sure that we understand what these are saying in the modern vernacular. And so whether that's getting into the nitty gritty, because militia is a scary word. In fact, I'm surprised the stream hasn't been yanked just because we used it. And so in the minds of a lot of people, thanks in part back to the First Amendment of the press, who are just saying the things they want to say, whether they're true or not, militia has been given this negative connotation.
Right.
And so it's important that I realize that most everybody who's going to sit down and watch, we are, what are we, 20 minutes into this? Yeah, anybody who's going to get 20 minutes into this stream, they already know and agree with what we're saying, but maybe we're going to give them the tools to help them articulate that to somebody else. So, all right. So if you're not sure what the Biden-Harris stance is on the Second Amendment, you can go, he has a page, I think it's joebiden.com/gun control or something, or you can go over to the main channel, and this morning, with permission from Mike, Mr. Guns and Gear, I reposted the video that YouTube took down from his channel. You can also go and see that on his Instagram and Facebook pages. Regardless, a lot of good information. Once again, maybe you are needing to educate the Dave Batistas of the world when they say that, well, Joe Biden is pro 2A. No.
People are actually saying that?
Oh man, that was a crap storm, Elias. But you try to stay off social media because you care about your mental health.
I really do. Yes, I do.
No, Dave.
What's left of it?
Dave Batista had the gall to post on, I think it was on Twitter, that everybody needs to understand that Joe Biden is pro 2A. He doesn't want to take anybody's guns. He just wants to take your assault weapons.
Well, assault weapon by their definition is a gun.
Oh yeah. If you go through and look at the whole everything that'll be covered by the NFA, if Biden has his way, I did the math on it, and it was just the amount in tax stamps, not in engraving fees, not in anything else, I would have to. I'd have to take a substantial loan out just to and I would be completely disarmed while I waited for those stamps to process. Oh no, I guess that's not true. I've got good old Double Barrel Joe's, some of his favorite weapons. I got me a pump action shotgun, and I got me a break action.
Isn't the guy you're talking about an actor?
Yeah, Drax.
His name sounds
Drax the
vaguely
Destroyer.
familiar.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. This is really off topic, but I'm not really sure why actors constantly think they need to pipe in with their thoughts.
More importantly,
probably for the same reason we think we should pipe in with our thoughts, I guess, now that I think about it, but still.
Fair enough. And it's absolutely, they're right. My question is why do they have so much sway? Actors, athletes.
That goes back to a whole different thing about how our society has a really twisted version of who our role models should be.
Yeah. These are our entertainers, and it's fine. Look, any skill, any item has nearly zero intrinsic value. It has only the value we place upon it. And so if we as a society have, through everything where we want to spend our money, have determined that these people are worth being paid millions of dollars a year, well then so be it. But that doesn't mean that their opinion matters any more than anybody else's. So
well, let me ask you something. We know Biden and where his stance is. He signed off on he voted in favor of the federal assault weapons ban in 1994.
Oh yeah, he's super proud of that.
Thought about coming for my AR-14.
Yes.
I would like to see my AR-14 first, if I could. And other things, we kind of know where his stance is. But obviously Trump, I mean, he's rated and endorsed by rated A, or given a grade of A and endorsed by the NRA. So obviously he's a very pro-2 candidate, right?
Allegedly.
Right.
He is less anti-2. He is the least anti-2A of the two candidates. I will gladly put it that way. He has...
That doesn't sound right at all.
Right. Yeah, no. So which is not the ringing endorsement one would hope for. I will say that if he, within the next 6 days, very publicly starts making steps to rein in this tyrannical ATF, it will go a long way towards making me feel better, even if it was just until Tuesday. But the problem is that the ATF is on the rampage that they're on because of his executive order banning bump stocks.
Right.
And look, man, I was asleep at the switch at that time. When that happened, owning an AR-15 wasn't even on my radar. I was paying absolutely zero attention to what was going on because, like so many people, I was like, oh, we've got a Republican in the presidency. We've got, in fact, I think when that happened, we still had the supermajority. I was like, everything's good. I was asleep at the switch. And the problem is that the ATF got that taste of it. And then we've got things like his statement about suppressors. Right. I don't like them. I'd very happily look into banning them. The fact that he tried to put a known anti-gunner in the position of the head of the ATF. We've got so many things that are just absolute black marks on his record. But I will say that Ammo Land News posted an article that did show the good things he's done.
Yeah.
And if I was smart, I would have had that pulled up. I don't. So, Elias, go ahead and expand on that, and I will find that list of pro-2A things he has done. So.
He's done pro-2A things?
I'm getting there.
You want me to expand on something I don't even know?
No. I want you just to expand on what you're thinking about, what your thoughts are on Mr. Trump's.
Well, as you said, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And at least on one side of it, it's not so blatant. I don't trust him 100%, and we'll talk about this more in one of the later amendments where he wants to throw due process out. But, you know, he might not be at the point where he wants to toss out and make firearms illegal. It's more, my concern about him is always the creeping.
Right.
Little bit here, a little bit there, and before you know it, it's all gone.
So, poor conservative, that's absolutely accurate. He did put an executive order in place that was meant for the ATF to quit making new mandates, and everything is supposed to go through Congress. I believe it's the IFR. Is that right? And the ATF is ignoring it completely. So, once again, though, the problem is the reason the ATF thinks that they can do that is because they've been given a taste of that power. So
right, and if he's not going to stop it, this is the point where he needs to be calling the director of the ATF in then and saying, look, what are you doing?
Correct.
But if he's not doing it, then, you know, it's the same thing as I tell my kids don't do that. But if I don't enforce it, well, Dad's not in the room, so I'm going to go do what I want.
There's a fantastic quote in, I'm going to find this real quick, and then I've got this list of 10 victories that only happened under Trump. That was the title of the article. But real quick, I'm reading Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. And if you haven't read it, very fantastic book. Highly recommend it. And let me find, there was a quote that I highlighted. And let me... It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. And so, basically, and I've been guilty of this myself as a cross-country coach, is I say, these are the rules, these are the penalties for not following the rules, and that's fine. You know, that's in writing, that's been, you know, my athletes agree that they've gotten the list of expectations, but then, you know, I let this slide, and I don't, and there's no penalty. Well, it's not, at that point then, it's no longer what the stated rule was. It was the level of tolerance, and that is the rule. It doesn't matter what's written, this is the rule. It's the whole concept of, you know, each of you can answer this to yourself. Do you drive exactly the speed limit? Probably not, because the accepted tolerance is 9 you're fine and 10 you're mine. And so at that point, the speed limit is not 55. The speed limit is 64. You know, so that's kind of where that falls. But then I've got this list of 10 wins for gun owners that only happen under a Trump presidency. So we'll roll through this and kind of discuss this. Victory number 1. Nominated and confirmed 2, soon to be 3, pro-Second Amendment Supreme Court justices, and over 200 pro-2A federal and circuit court judges. So I will say we've had an issue with these alleged pro-2A Supreme Court justices actually taking Second Amendment cases. But we have also seen, like in the Ninth Circuit Court, we've seen where we're seeing potential major changes over in the Ninth Circuit. So what are your thoughts on that, Elias?
Well, Trump has appointed a lot of justices to the Ninth Circuit. Actually, overall, he's appointed a lot of justices. He had a huge backlog of vacancies when he came to the White House back in 2017. Mm-hmm. So he has filled he's filled all those spots, actually. So that includes the Ninth Circuit, which we have seen some pretty decent rulings coming out of the Ninth Circuit, such as ruling against California with the magazine ban.
Right.
And things like that. It's not over yet because those were just kind of a couple of the judges from the Ninth Circuit, not the full circuit. And California is expected to appeal it to the full circuit, but we'll see if that happens. But the fact is that there are more conservative justices now.
Right. Okay, victory number 2. President Trump recently renewed his promise to sign concealed carry reciprocity if Congress put such a bill on his desk. And so this is an easy one. This was one of his campaign promises.
But I don't think he hasn't done anything.
But
all he said is, well, if it comes across my desk, he knows it's not going to come across his desk.
Right. See,
so it's one of those, to me, I don't think that should be on there of 10 promises or 10 things he's done, because he hasn't actually done anything. All he said is, I'll do something if it ever comes, but it's not going to come.
My issue there is, why did that bill not go across his desk when we owned both branches of Congress?
And that's a great question, and this is one of my frustrations with the Republican Party, is the fact that for 2 years they held both houses of Congress and the executive branch, and they did nothing.
Yeah.
The best they could do was a tax cut that really wasn't all that much in the grand scheme of things. That's going to most of the provisions are going to expire, and they got rid of the individual mandate on the ACA, and that's it. That's pretty much all they accomplished in 2 years.
Yeah.
So that bill should have been something that should have easily gotten through.
Absolutely. Maybe walk back some NFA items. Maybe there's a lot of things. It legitimately.
I think walking back the NFA would have been really, really tough in the GCA, but they could have at least done that. That would have been something to show, hey, we actually.
I'll tell you.
Are doing something.
A couple of things that I would have liked to have seen, and these realistically would have had. One of them would have had a little bit more of an impact on the street. But if they would have repealed the automatic weapons ban, the 86 AWB, and see, realistically, all that would have allowed for is new production automatic weapons. It would have reopened the automatic weapon registry. But there's still a pretty high cost to that, plus the tax stamp. So it's not like it would have flooded the streets with automatic weapons, which is what the left would have a person believe. And if they would have passed some variant of the Safe Hearing Act. Those two things right there, okay, obviously, my dream world, there is no NFA, and you can still directly order firearms to your home. But whatever, if I've got to compromise, that would have been a start. Anyway, victory number 3, I think, is legitimate. I'll read it for you. The Trump administration worked closely with Gun Owners of America during the early days of the pandemic. Responding to a letter from GOA, Department of Homeland Security issued a memo designating the firearms industry as essential business. And because many states directly referenced the DHS guidelines, many gun stores were protected. And in other states, this DHS designation became essential for GOA when fighting to overturn unconstitutional shutdown orders.
I do like that he also did I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's one of the emergency acts. He invoked it. They didn't actually use any of the provisions on it, but what it did by invoking it was make sure that nobody could decide to start disarming people.
Right.
From a federal standpoint. There's a provision in that law that protects firearm owners from the government suddenly deciding going all FEMA.
Right.
Down in Louisiana and start confiscating for your own protection. So I will give him that. That was another thing that I think he did right there.
Yeah.
And I really do think that was part of why he invoked it.
Victory number 4. And this one, okay, anyway. President Trump directed his administration to restore your right to keep and bear arms on over 400 lake and river projects, totaling over 11 million acres of public land in 43 states. So,
this is targeting Corps of Engineers. a lot of places where it's a Corps of Engineer dam or park, you can't carry a firearm.
Right.
So
I remember that.
was, yeah.
Victory number 5, President Trump kept his campaign promises by signing House Joint Resolution 40, which rejected a final rule submitted by the SSA. Without the president action here, an estimated 75,000 otherwise law-abiding citizens would have had their names submitted to the NICS system as prohibited person each year. So I'm not familiar with the joint.
So what this is so what was happening was, and they started doing this with VA.
Right.
And they were going to take it to the SSA, which said that if a court ruled that you were no longer, if you were educated, I can't think of the way to pronounce that, but pretty much saying that if a court ruled that you are not able to take care of your own finances for whatever reason, you are also prohibited from owning a firearm. So that's why, like with VA, there's a lot of veterans that are concerned about going to mental health now because they think they're going to be told at some point that they can't own their firearms anymore because they've been targeted, and that was going to bring SSA into it. So
gotcha.
He kind of stopped that from happening.
Gotcha. So that was a legitimate victory then.
Because it doesn't necessarily mean that they're mentally unstable. It's just for whatever reason.
Right.
There can be a host of reasons why you might not be able to manage your own finances.
And so this is where the anti-gun contingent would say, well, a person who can't manage their own finances or isn't financially stable will be more likely to commit a crime, blah, blah. It's just a bunch of future thought crime, future crime.
Right. Like I said, there's a host of reasons why somebody might not be able to manage their own finances.
Right.
And to sit there and put them under a blanket, ruling saying that just because a court said it now you can't have a firearm, it's a whole separate thing. Courts already have authority to stop somebody from owning a firearm if there is a real public threat because of mental illness and stuff like that. They didn't need another one.
Right. Victory number 6, President Trump unsigned the UN arms trade treaty before thousands of gun owners, saying we will never allow foreign bureaucrats to trample on your Second Amendment freedom. Not foreign, only domestic bureaucrats can do that.
That's only I'll be allowed to do that.
So, I'm all for unsigning UN stuff. I'm a big fan of America
This
First.
had more to do with, honestly, this had to do a lot with importing firearms and things like that. So, it kept my Glock safe. Which,
there again, we'll get there. We'll get there, but now the ATF is threatening imported firearms first. But anyway,
we're going to do that on our own. Again,
right.
Domestic.
Okay, victory number 7. President Trump empowered his administration officials to repeatedly attempt to allow Defense Distributed to publish 3D printed gun files. While the Obama administration began this infringement, the Trump State Department settled the lawsuit in 2018, allowed for unlimited release. Unfortunately, several states' attorney generals filed a lawsuit and won an injunction against the opposition. The case is currently pending. So,
this is one of those really sticking points for me, though, because on the one hand, this should be a states' rights issue. On the other hand, they kind of blew that out of the water by deciding to impose everything else on the states.
Right.
So I could have gone along with California and Illinois of wanting to completely restrict firearms in their states, but guys kind of screwed up by deciding that, if you don't want prayer in school, then nobody in the country gets to have it.
Right.
You kind of screwed up on that one.
Wait. So I'm going back to I was going back to the executive order that should be preventing this crap from the ATF, and there's a couple of them, 13.891 and 13.892. One of them is promoting rule of law through improved agency guidance documents, and the other one is promoting the rule of law through transparency and fairness in civil administrative enforcement and education. So I'm not sure those titles sound like they might be the kind of thing that's going to prevent. Anyway,
we'll see. We'll see if he actually enforces it.
So anyway, but
he did just make it easier to fire people. So there is that.
Back to the
maybe that has something to do with it.
Back to the 3D printed stuff. I feel like not only should that be protected under the Second Amendment, that should be protected under the First Amendment. And this goes down to, on the one hand, states' rights. On the other hand, we've decided that the Bill of Rights applies to the states, and so
right, and that's what I'm saying. As soon as some of these states decided that their disgust for prayer in school meant that nobody in the country should allow to be done, well, at that point, you just now opened up the precedent. You decided that's the way you want it to be done, so Chicago learned it the hard way. That's what you get. Now you can't tell somebody they're not allowed to own a firearm in their own house.
Right.
You had that right, but you threw it away. So that's on you.
All right, victory number 8. President Trump's Department of Justice filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court in the case New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York City in support of the defendants. While the High Court dropped the ball with this case, that was the aforementioned justice.
Yeah, and I disagree with them dropping the ball, but that's a different thing.
But the administration's brief was a huge show of support for the individual right to keep arms. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that they were filing an amicus brief and to the Supreme Court was going to be a huge help. In that case, I disagree with the part where they dropped the ball because the fact of the matter is the statute never existed anymore. So effectively what they wanted was there. And I think that there could be some due process questions of can the court really rule on something that's not even existent anymore?
Right.
So I kind of get that. And I was not upset with the court when they took up the case and then rejected it by saying, hey, it doesn't exist anymore. There's nothing for us to rule on because that doesn't exist.
The only thing I could think is if they would have taken that and used it, and with the disclaimer, we're only taking this case because the ordinance was on the books at the time of the case publication. We are doing this to set precedent.
I think that's where you get very dangerously close to legislating for the bench. Most of the time with cases, they're not actually ruling on every single little case in the world that runs it. So, for instance, with the case, we'll use the bakery as an example. Mm-hmm. That did not set for every other person who was suing.
Gotcha.
So, like there was florists in other states. That doesn't all of a sudden make their case just disappear and they won. Those cases will still go to trial. But now the precedent has been set by the Supreme Court. So now those justices can sit there and say, hey, the precedent by the Supreme Court is this. Now they can still do their own ruling and do whatever they want to. That's the way it works. I think that case, that florist, for instance, could still end up at the Supreme Court.
Right.
But typically when precedent is set by the Supreme Court, the lower courts are going to follow it.
Right.
And so when you do something like that where there is nothing and you're saying, well, we're going to set the precedent, that's at that point becomes legislation from the bench.
Fair enough.
In my opinion. So, and that's why I said I wasn't really upset. I wasn't surprised when they dropped it, and I completely understood because I think Roberts, the Chief Justice, was always very big on not politicizing the court. And so if he can avoid a politicizing of the court and any kind of legislation, I think Roberts tries to lean that way. He's not perfect at it. He's screwed up a few times, but I know that's his overall thoughts on it. So,
all right.
And I think if New York tried it again, I think when the state is the one that came down on New York City,
right?
The state themselves knew what the city was doing was wrong, and so not only did the city have to reverse what they did, but the state actually put a law in place forbidding the city from ever doing that again.
So there you go, and then so that's legislation from the proper location. Fair enough. Victory number 9. The Trump administration successfully completed a modernization of export control regulations on the arms manufacturing industry. And so it basically removed a $2,200 fee that small gunsmiths and firearm companies were forced to pay even if they did not manufacture or export. So that was a win for small gun businesses because it removed a fee that was unnecessary for what their business was. So, okay, I'll take that as a legitimate victory. And then finally,
Well,
okay,
it also put that kind of stuff into the right hand. So before, the Department of State was the one who managed all that kind of stuff. And what it did was actually move it to the Department of Commerce where it belongs. This is a commerce thing.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, is it actually moved to where it belonged, which is in the the federal government's authority to handle interstate commerce.
Alrighty. And then victory number 10 has to do with the Fix NICS legislation. Gun Owners of America opposed that from start to finish, and there was the criticism that because of the way that fugitive from justice was being defined in Fix NICS, President Trump moved to redefine that, which removed tens of thousands of names that would have been added to the prohibited persons list from things like simple unpaid out-of-state parking tickets. And then more recently...
Well, if you can't park, then you shouldn't have a gun.
What if you're in a hurry to get out of your car because you need to use the gun? I mean, there's got to be exceptions.
Ooh.
Yeah. So anyway,
good point,
and then here within the last couple of weeks, though we are once again still dealing with fallout potentially from this, potentially whatever, we had, thanks to pressure from folks like us on our legislators and on President Trump, the ATF did in fact issue a 60-day stay on their ruling against Q that the Honey Badger is a short barrel rifle. Elias and I talked about that last week, the 60-day stay. I will say that I thought it was a one of those too quiet situations, and recent announcements from the ATF once again kind of bore that out. But so there we go. We took a long time on the Second Amendment because
the second one, again, it's your show, so it makes sense.
And but at the end of the day, Biden is completely anti-2A. Trump is I still consider him a wild card. If you're going to choose between those two based on Second Amendment, I guess Trump's it. Third-party candidates have better stated positions on the Second Amendment, but we're not going to dig into that because at the end of the day, we know that the winner of the election, the winner of the electoral votes will be either Trump or Biden.
And also we don't have anything to really base it on.
Correct. There's no
there's no voting record. There's no anything
exactly.
else. We have nothing. With Biden, we have a voting record. With Trump, we have his record from the last 4 years. So.
Correct. And once again, in spite of those 10 things that we just read, some of which really kind of are just there to say, oh no, Trump's pro-2A. We definitely have things like the bump stock ban. And where nobody needs that. So,
right.
And that's where it's so important, guys. It doesn't matter. When there's gun legislation on the table, it doesn't matter what your opinion of that particular item is. You have to remember that we're setting precedent. Once we say, 7.6 is an armor-piercing pistol round, well, then at that point, they said, if that went through, now we're going to go after M855. Now, M855 was for a more popular firearm at the time, and so there was an outrage, and that didn't get through. But the precedent was set. That's why they went for it. Well,
right.
We didn't raise enough of stink, and I am personally included. This isn't some theoretical we. I am included in that we. We did not raise enough of a stink about bump stocks, and so now, it's just an accessory. You don't need that. That arm brace is just an accessory. No, you have to show you have to show, just as an example, oh, well, fine, you can have a bump stock, but you need a prescription from your disability doctor.
Right.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that it goes down to. Now, I would like to say, based on the discussion with, how the ATF is trying to redefine rifle pattern pistols as any other weapons because they fire a rifle caliber. Well, here's the problem with that, ATF. You banned 7 and 6 based on the fact that it was a quote-unquote armor-piercing pistol round. That was your determination. You have determined that 5.45 by 3.9 is a pistol caliber. You made that determination. And so then by extrapolation, any other firearm that has the same form factor, regardless of caliber, is a pistol. There we go. So somebody write that down and send it off to some lawyers, because that was good. That was good stuff. Okay. All right. Let's keep moving, because we're already at almost an hour.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is the rest of this probably go by a little bit quicker, so.
Probably. I mean, guys, look right above Elias and I. 2A. I mean, that's our bread and butter.
So for that to take the meat and potatoes makes perfect sense.
So Amendment 3, I don't think we're going to have any issue with, we definitely don't have any. We don't have any precedent from either candidate, I don't think. But no.
And you're probably never going to. There's never even been a Supreme Court case that had to address this. Third Amendment, for those who don't know, pretty much has to deal with soldiers cannot be. The government cannot force you to quarter soldiers in your house.
Now, I would like to say, I just noticed that in time of peace. So does that mean?
Correct.
Does that mean if we had a war?
In time of war, you could, yeah.
Okay, but that would also require war at home.
Declaration, right? A war declaration from Congress, not Trump deciding he can declare war on whoever he wants.
So, and fellas, ladies, I'm here to tell you that if we have a war on our own soil, there is already a soldier quartered in this home, regardless of what my official standing with the United States government is. Anyway, moving on. Fourth Amendment, right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So, they can't just come into your house without a warrant. The warrant has to say, we are searching this property, specifying these locations, and we're looking for these items. Ooh, this one's fun, because we do know where at least Mr. Trump stands on this.
We kind of know where both of them stand on it, and it ain't good.
No, because both of them highly support red flag laws. And,
and we're going to get more of this into the 5th and 6th, but something you'll see through the 4th, 5th, and 6th all have kind of running together is due process. And Trump could not care less about due process. In fact, that was a quote from him when dealing with red flag laws was, screw due process. We can do that later.
Yeah. Take the guns first, due process Trump, later was the exact quote.
Trump is also quoted as saying, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, which there's some violation. I know this is one of those things that people all kind of disagree on, but that doesn't really show due process. But more importantly is the president telling local authorities how to do things, which is going to be a violation of the 9th and 10th, or the 10th Amendment rather. So that's a violation of the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 10th. Trump wants to reauthorize Section 215 of the Patriot Act, which allowed eavesdropping on Americans. So these are just a couple of the things that come to mind, where Trump does not really care about due process. He doesn't care about warrants. He doesn't care about anything. And Trump is the one who has been pushing to get more firearm or military surplus into the hands of police and things like that. Biden is not any better. Biden was the one who was quoted back in the 70s when Nixon was pushing through crime bills and the Democrats were trying to say, hey, okay, yeah, we understand crime and punishment, but there needs to be actual justice also and make sure we do this the right way. And Biden was the one who, even though he was a Democrat, said lock up the SOBs. He's the one who signed the 1994 crime bill, which was pretty bad in some respects, especially with like mandatory minimums and things like that. So Biden's not really much better in that regard. I'm pretty sure Biden, I'd have to look it up. I'm pretty sure Biden voted for the Patriot Act and things like that. Right. I mean, everybody voted for the Patriot Act because it was a really good load of BS that was fed to everyone.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, in that case, when it comes to the fourth, neither of them are very good. Unfortunately, it has been up to the courts to protect the Fourth Amendment. The courts have done pretty well at that. Yeah.
So, and
both of them kind of suck when it comes to that one.
There again, we're going to stop, and I'm going to plug somebody who's not a sponsor. Though, if anybody has a contact and wants to get them a hold of me, USCCA, Concealed Carriers Insurance. They have actually said in a live stream with Military Arms Channel that it's not a directly stated benefit, but if you are a USCCA member and you are red flagged, that they will use the benefits of your policy to assist you with the legal standings of getting your rights reinstated. So USCCA Concealed Carriers Insurance, I should start putting my referral link in every video. I am a member, have been for over a year. You get fantastic quarterly publication if you like having magazines on the coffee table. Heck, my daughters have occasionally grabbed it and started reading through some of the articles, and that kind of thing is what started my love for firearms. As I remember always having American Rifleman magazines all around the house when I was a kid. So, right. And then also they have training, they have so many other things. And they're not the only concealed carrier insurance out there. They are simply the one that when I looked at the benefits that I chose.
Yeah, I gotta say the Fourth Amendment is probably one of the most important amendments in the Constitution. 5 and 6, for instance, don't really matter if you don't have the fourth.
Right.
5 and 6 really start getting into due process and trials and things like that.
Right.
And it doesn't really matter if they've been able to go in and just take whatever they want to, or seize whatever they wanted to from you.
Right.
So, Fourth Amendment's extremely important. So to see that they haven't been real great on these is not the most confident building experience. So
yeah. Fifth Amendment is specifically no person shall be held to answer for a capital or infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment from a grand jury, except in military cases, and then you had to have been actively in service. No person can be subjected to double jeopardy, basically. So if you were tried for murder once and they found you not guilty, even with new evidence, they can't try you again.
Correct.
You shall not be compelled to be a witness against yourself. And then you can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. Boy, that gets violated every single day. Anyway.
Yep. And nor shall private property be taken for public use
without just compensation. So this is again one of those things. I have stated that red flag laws violate the Fifth Amendment based on the fact that your property is seized, but it's not for without compensation and things like. I said the bump stock.
But there's no due process.
Right. And the bump stock ban, everybody was required to surrender or destroy their bump stocks without just compensation, but they weren't seized for public use. Of course, until that actually gets before the Supreme Court, where we obviously the bump stock ban
We
lawsuit
can
is
kind of we can kind of look at it, and I do think that you get into an issue of due process.
Yeah.
I think we talked about it a little bit last week of why I don't think that. I think that it would be very interesting, for people who have already bought these firearms or these accessories, that suddenly the ATF has decided are illegal and telling people you need to return them. I'd be very interested to see a case go up because they were legal when they were purchased.
Yeah.
And because they were legal when they were purchased, how does that play into it?
Right.
What due process? There is no due process. ATF is saying, give it to me. Well, that's not due process.
Well, and furthermore, their clarifications are anything but, and they keep going back and forth. You specifically spoke last week about people shouldering them. And the thing is, though, is that the ATF has gone, but they said, no, it's fine if you shoulder it. No, it should never touch your shoulder. It's okay if you shoulder it every now and then, if it happens to touch your shoulder, but the fact of the matter is, I'm fine with them saying you can't modify a pistol brace to make it function better as a stock. I'm fine with that.
Right.
But after I've purchased something, it's mine.
Right.
And so, if I want to use it as a grip to swing my firearm at a home intruder, so be it. It's mine.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, we're getting off in the weeds.
So when it comes to the Fifth Amendment, Trump is quoted as saying Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, horrible.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, Trump is not a fan of the Fifth Amendment. Specifically, he's not a fan of the you can't incriminate yourself. Ironically, all the people that have been called up as witnesses against him have all pled the Fifth. So I find that kind of funny, a little bit ironic. But yes, Trump is not a fan of the Fifth Amendment. Trump's not a fan of due process, though. We already know that. Again, we talked about the red flag laws a little bit ago and Trump's statement about it. As far as Trump's concerned, or the looting also, most of the laws, and this is where we get into that whole thing about the police. Police actions are supposed to be predicated on there's an imminent danger and threat to a life, not looting into a store. And this isn't to say that I don't feel bad for like store owners that have, and I don't feel bad for Walmart. I'm talking about mom and pop stores who their places have been raided. It has nothing to do with that. But the fact of the matter is, we're a civilized nation and we need to act within a certain boundary. And killing somebody over stealing something from a store is not a proportional response. But as far as Trump is concerned, it is, and there's no due process. He just wants to, that kind of thing. It's ironic that, you call for that at the same time, or I shouldn't say him. We already know where he stands. The people who are saying that the police have gone too far are then saying, go ahead and shoot all the people who are looting. It's like, it doesn't work that way. Like I said, if there's an imminent threat to life, that's a whole different situation. But that's not what Trump was talking about at the time.
But let's read this again.
Because at the time that this was before they really started turning violent. It was some people who are mad who were looting places and stuff like that, but they weren't actually threatening anybody. And as soon as a gun was pulled on them, they put it down and run away. So I just want to make sure we're understanding right where we're sitting.
Yeah. And let me I'm going to cut this out so that the statement is more concise and a little bit easier, because there's a lot of commas and semicolons and whatnot. So, nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So when the looting starts, the shooting starts, flies in direct opposition to that portion of the Fifth Amendment.
Correct.
Now, I once again want to go on record as saying that rioting is not the same as looting, and neither of them are the same as protesting. So,
protesting is the best thing. Looting, a little bit worse, and riots are just And I completely agree with the idea that peaceful protests rarely change anything.
Right.
But if you're gonna riot, you need it. It's got to be done a certain way. Is the only way I can do it. And the way they were doing it, of hurting the people that they were claiming to be on the side of, that's not really helping. I could actually go with, all right, I get it. When they go into the police station and overthrow the police station.
Right.
All right. I'm not saying that I think you should, but hey, you know what? At least you're targeting your anger at the people that you're actually mad at that you believe need to be changed. But when you're destroying your own neighborhood, that really never made any sense to me.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of people who are not actually there to try to change anything. They're just opportunists. The same thing with the looting. Having said that, again, it's not a proportional response when people are looting to start shooting them. So Biden's not much better. During the Justice Thomas confirmation hearing, Biden pretty much implied that he disagreed with what he thought of as excessive protections for personal property. In other words, he thought should be easier for the government to take property from people. So he didn't come out right out and say it, but the line of questioning against Justice Thomas, Justice Thomas was very much of, you can't take people's property just because you want to.
Right.
So Biden kind of alluded to he didn't really agree with that idea. So I'll leave that there.
And poor conservative, what you had to say there really was something that I meant to say or allude to on a couple of occasions, and then lost my train of thought. We derailed coming out of the depot. Trump is a New York City businessman and a developer, and so I'm wondering if a lot of his problem with due process comes from the fact that in the business realm, he was the boss. If he said fired, you were fired. If he said, whatever. And so in his mind, coming from that background, I could see, and I don't agree with it, but I could see where he would think, all this due process is so inefficient for getting the job done.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that doesn't have an impact on it, or maybe he's just every bit the terrible human being that, nobody is the terrible human being that the left paints Trump to be, I don't think. So maybe some of them. And the only reason I say that is because we tend to judge other people by our own values.
Right.
A person who, man, I'm just going to go ahead and say this, and this is coming from a place of white privilege, but a person who is constantly, my experience has been, people who constantly are calling other people racist and they mean it are typically some of the most racist people you'll ever meet themselves. Yeah. And so people who are compulsive liars never trust anybody else to be telling the truth because they know that they themselves don't tell the truth. People who constantly think that you're trying to steal from them, it's probably because they're always looking for a way to take something that doesn't belong to them. So people tend to judge people by their own core values. And that's why you see people who are honest people and do their best to be decent people get taken advantage of over and over again because they judge other people based on their values. So that was a little bit of a tangent there, but that's why I firmly believe that within the left, they absolutely have all of these traits, all of these things that they accuse Trump of, because that's why they accuse Trump of it. Okay, moving on. We're at the Sixth Amendment. Criminal prosecution, speedy trial. We've already talked about the fact that, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. So, that's about as speedy as you can get, right?
Yeah, that's not really a trial. So I didn't really see anything much. That's kind of a clear-cut one. Right. That's not really, So.
In suits at common law, Amendment 7.
7th, there is one for Trump on this one against him.
Okay, let's hear it.
Trump touted the federal tort reform, which some scholars believe would have violated the 7th Amendment because it was going to impose restrictions on what you could sue. It was geared towards medical malpractice, and it was going to limit the amount of money that somebody could sue for. on a federal level, and they claimed that it was a violation. What I had seen was it was a violation of the Seventh Amendment. It was believed to be. It's something that never passed, by the way. It never passed the House, or rather, it passed the House and never passed the Senate, and it died in committee. But essentially, it would have limited them, and the claim was that the Seventh Amendment leaves these kind of things into the hands of the jury to decide what is and is not excessive. And so by telling them what you can and can't do, the jury, it would have violated that Seventh Amendment of leaving it to a jury to decide. So I'm not versed enough in the Seventh Amendment or that kind of thing to know whether or not they were wrong, but that's the kind of, I wouldn't even say it's really against them. It's just maybe there, at least to some, it was a violation. It would have been a violation if he had signed it. Again, it died in the Senate. He never did, but that was pretty much it. For the most part, again, Seventh Amendment's not one that's really touched by Congress, or the president.
And Biden had anything about trial by jury?
No.
I mean, probably if you go back to when he was railing against segregation.
It's possible back then he was, but nothing came up when I looked.
Eighth Amendment: excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed. And this is those parts probably we won't find anything, but this one, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. So
there's certainly some argument, again, you could say against Trump and Biden in regards to this, and where it's going to come into is the really, really murky area of the, at least from what I can tell, the quote-unquote enhanced interrogations and waterboarding that can be seen as cruel and unusual. Now, of course, there's some question about whether or not the framers ever intended for the Constitution to apply to non-American citizens. But one could also argue that, or outside the country, but one could argue with that if they're okay with doing it over there, at what point does it become okay to do it over here? Some also argue that the way that women and families and children, especially mothers and children, have been separated when they come across the border could also fall into this realm of cruel and unusual. And I'm not here to debate who started the camps and how they got to the point that they are at. The fact is they've spanned multiple presidencies at this point, and which is why I'll implicate both Trump and Biden in this. Trump's excuse so far has been, well, he did it too. Well, no, that's not a good excuse.
Correct.
So there is some argument there for that is cruel and unusual.
Well, and I'll go back and revisit our long Second Amendment conversation, because who gets to define, trying to ask who gets to define cruel and unusual? Extorting me for an additional $200 per item for things that I already own, or forcing me to sell it to an entity that never owned it in the first place and calling it a buyback. I consider that to be cruel and unusual. Right, that's where you can get into
excessive. And you could look at that as being excessive bail also.
Or excessive fines. Yeah. Because, the fine for illegal or unregistered NFA items is up to $250,000 and 10 years in prison per item, as I recall. That's excessive. That's cruel and unusual.
And of course, we also deal with cruel and unusual punishment, and that goes back to our Fifth Amendment discussion earlier of if the looting starts, then the shooting starts, as being a disproportionate response to a crime. So that's the 8th.
All right, 9th.
I would say the 9th and the 10th, we really, in my opinion, should wrap them up together because they kind of go hand in hand.
Okay, let's just do that. So the 9th Amendment says...
Because we'll do it for the sake of time, because usually it's a violation of one, it's a violation of the other at the same time.
The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Basically, the Constitution is not the be-all, end-all of your rights. Engage your brains. The government doesn't own you.
Right. And this is where right to privacy falls in. Just because it's not written in there, this is where the Patriot Act is a violation of the 9th Amendment. Just because right to privacy is not one of the amendments doesn't mean that it's not a right.
And then powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited it by the states, are reserved to the states or to the people.
As I put in my notes, there's too many to count on both sides.
Right. Right.
Whether you want to talk about our discussion earlier, the looting, the shooting, or federal agents marching around in Oregon, or Obama ACA, or any of these other things. These are all things. The federal crime bill. These are all things that should be left to the states. Mandatory minimums and things like that. These are state level issues, not federal. And if you actually read the Constitution, the vast majority of things belong to the states.
Well, and I think that probably the more critical thing there is or to the people.
Yes.
So many,
which the states can delegate out to the people, right?
So many people are like, well, that can't be. You're not free to do that. That's not in the Constitution. Yeah, it is. It falls under the 10th Amendment.
Yep.
If it's not delegated to the United States, if the Constitution doesn't say this is a job of the national government, then it's not.
Correct. And that's exactly what it's saying. It's saying that if it is not in any of these articles, and it's not in any amendments that you later on you amend things, then it belongs to the states, and that's all there is to it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It belongs to the states, and that's obviously the biggest violation of all of our federal government is how many things they've taken away from the states.
Yeah. But the states have allowed it. And here's the thing. We the people have gone on for so long saying, oh, let's do this the easy way. We'll just, I don't want to deal with this, so somebody else can deal with this. And I'm going to tell you what. The centers of power will always want to draw more power. So if we're too lazy to do it ourselves, then they'll gladly do it for us, and they won't give it back.
You know what one of the dumbest things the states ever did when it comes to their own power? Ratifying the 17th Amendment. Before the 17th Amendment, senators were chosen by the state legislatures.
Right.
The senators didn't work for the people, they worked for the states. That was by design. The representatives worked for the people, the senators worked for the states. Well, 17th Amendment comes along, they decide, no, it'll be a popular vote. Well, and at that point, it follows the exact same corruption, especially because, again, we talked about corporations earlier being able to contribute and actually run things.
Right.
If it were up to the state legislatures, you would make sure that the people you're sending are going to accurately represent your state.
Right.
And make sure that they're not taking power away from your state. Why? Because they work for the state legislators. So, 17 is one of those that I'm a very big fan of. Let's repeal the 17th Amendment, because that has just introduced a whole mess. But the states gave up their rights by doing that. That was the state's representation at the federal level. The president was supposed to represent was supposed to execute the laws. The House of Representatives were supposed to represent the people, and the senators were supposed to represent the states. And the states gave up their rights. So the states effectively gave up their rights given to them by the 10th Amendment. Good job.
Yeah. I like Poor Conservative just said in the chat, complacency is the quicksand of people's power. Yeah, I love that. If you guys are following me on social media, and if you're not, you should be. You've seen that I am almost halfway through my journey through Andy Frisella's 75 Hard program. You can call that an Ironman for your mind. It is not meant to be a fitness program. It is not meant to be a weight loss program. It is meant to get the participant in the position of saying, I've got these things to do and I'm going to do it. And it doesn't matter the hardships that are in the way. I've got to get these done. And it will transform your mindset, because once you start doing that in these areas, you start saying, well, I'm going to do that in these areas.
Right.
It's absolutely transformative. And yeah, and once you start going through that, when you start seeing places where either in your own life you haven't been and you've allowed critical things to go unchecked,
mm-hmm.
or when you see it on the big scale, it just pisses you off. And yeah, that's absolutely where I am. So to that end, to that end, the pistol braced rifle pattern pistol, whatever, being defined as an AOW and any other weapon, an NFA regulated item, that is currently ongoing. If you have not reached out to your representatives to make comment on this, go to my Facebook page, or the channel's Facebook page, Tactical Review 2019, and within the last few posts, you will see where I shared a post from Military Arms Channel that is a link to contact your representatives. You will put in your address, and it's going to pull up your state and federal representatives. It pulled up my state legislatures, my good old rhino, Governor Holcomb. It pulled up President Trump and my federal legislatures. And it gave me a blank slate. All right? I want to remind you that using profanity will automatically probably make it to where your email never goes anywhere. I want to remind you that threatening your legislatures is not a great way to get your point across.
It's also a federal crime.
Okay, well, that's a good point too.
Depending on what kind of threatening you're doing.
Typographical errors make you look ignorant. It will make you not get noticed. Tim, Military Arms Channel, has a template letter, and then Elias helped me draft a template letter. Well, draft a letter. It's the one that I sent. I have it posted or pasted into that post so that you can use that as a template. If you don't live in Indiana, you'll want to take out the part about Hoosiers. Just go ahead and mention that. Don't just copy and paste without reading, because it was my letter that I've left as a template. Absolutely, you need to be reaching out to your representatives at the federal level to get this crap stopped, but at the state level to say, what will you do to protect me as a law-abiding citizen at the state level if the federal government doesn't get this in check? So, and yes, I'm yelling at you because this is a serious case. This is bump stock 2.0, and this is something that will make countless millions of gun owners instant felons. All right, I reached out to Chad Wiley, CEO of Palmetto State Armory, actually, for comment on this. And I said, Chad, can you give me any kind of ballpark estimate on how many just Palmetto State sales for calendar year 2020 that this would impact? And he said, all I can guess is a lot. He said, we manufacture 2,000 uppers every day, and I would estimate that half of them are pistol-length uppers. So, and if you guys have been on Palmetto State Armory's website, you know that they don't just sell PSA AR-15s. If he's talking about manufacturing uppers, that means that doesn't include their AK pistols. That doesn't include the ARV or the AKV. And once again, that doesn't include Springfield Saints and blah, 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 blah that they sell. And just based on that, if they're selling, let's say that they're selling 1,000 rifle pattern pistols. That's my term for it because legally it's a pistol, but the pattern of the firearm is of a rifle. Okay, fine. That is $200,000 a day in potential tax stamp revenue. I can see why the ATF, which is the militaristic branch of the Treasury Department, I can see why they're going to try to go after this. But the fact of the matter is, these items are in common use. The Supreme Court has already ruled that when a firearm is in common use, it is protected by the Second Amendment by default. So, Port Conservative, you guys know I have a 300 Blackout pistol. It's been on the channel. I love my AKV. As a matter of fact, everybody who shoots my AKV loves my AKV. I've had to nearly beat people up to keep it out of their range bag. Elias was one of them.
Only a little bit.
I've got my AR-180S or my BRN-180S from Brownells. Fantastic little firearm. As a matter of fact, those two firearms are featured in a roundabout way in the upcoming video that should be dropping next Monday. Yeah, and right there, that's $600 in tax stamps right there, just like that. And oh, by the way, I'm not allowed to have those firearms until I get reapproved to own my existing property. And oh, by the way, now you can't take that across state line without permission from the Crown. Oh, by the way, if you're traveling over a certain distance from your home, I believe, even within the same state, you've got to contact the ATF and say, hey, I'm transporting an NFA item from here to here for this reason. It's garbage. The entire NFA is garbage. So we're not going to get to hashtag repeal the NFA right now, unfortunately. But let's prevent more crap from being added to the registry unnecessarily.
No, one step at a time.
Yeah, and for conservative, yep, build them to suit your wants. And Elias, to your point, people are basically using the pistol braces to bypass the NFA on short barrel rifles.
Oh.
Yeah, and there's a reason. There's a reason that special forces teams and urban combat teams use these short barrel rifles. They're fantastic in and around structures. When I'm defending my home against a potential home invader, I am in and around a frickin' structure. So, okay. Anyway, let's get my blood pressure back down. Let's quit channeling my inner Alex Jones.
Oh.
I've never actually watched Alex Jones. I've just seen him on the memes. Anyhow, so yeah, follow me on social media.
Use a fry short of a Happy Meal.
Follow me on social media. Use the links in the description. Follow Elias on Facebook. If you want to help support the channel, make sure you're liking the videos. Subscribe to the channel. You have homework now. Go ahead and subscribe here to Tactical Review Live. This is, as you've seen, the new home of our Wednesday live streams. And then make sure, if you're not subscribed to the main channel, that link is down below, or youtube.com/c/tactical review. Make sure you're subscribed there. It doesn't cost you anything except a few clicks to subscribe, and that tells YouTube that you find value in what it is that we're doing. You can also support the channel by heading over to the merchandise store. It's currently housed over at Teespring. They're going to handle all of the transaction, the printing, the shipping, and everything. They're going to get you t-shirts, coffee cups, stickers, whatever it is you order over there, and the channel will get a few dollars in support for every purchase you make. You can also support the channel directly, either over on Patreon or at Subscribestar. As soon as Subscribestar didn't work. That's fine. It's fine. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Elias, I've told him to go check you out. What are you all about except helping me out here on constitutional considerations?
Mostly that these days.
Oh, well, fair enough.
That's been a big part of it. Yep.
I really, I cannot thank Elias enough for the help that he gives us over here on the channel. Your background, your mind for understanding these constitutional situations is just fantastic, and it's a huge help to me. So, guys, thank you for being active in the chat. Appreciate you guys joining. Stay tuned for more content on both channels, and until next time, shoot straight, stay safe.